All right, guys, welcome back. It's podcast time, and we have special guest Harvey Martin today. Harvey is one of my closest friends, and it's a friendship that really went deep fast. Harvey is a deep thinker, an original thinker, but we also share a similar past. He was a former professional baseball player, and in the baseball world, we throw around this term grinder. It's the type of player, the type of athlete who really has to master the details, has this blue collar attitude and work ethic. And both Harvey and I sort of shared that behavior. And I think it really informs not only our conversation in this episode, but our friendship. I'll never forget Harvey's path to what kind of now makes him famous, which is this illustrious seat as a thought leader in Major League Baseball and mental and physical performance. Before that, he was an entrepreneur in the dog days of entrepreneurship, just like me. And I'll never forget getting a phone call from Harvey. I rarely answer my phone, but when he called, it was a unique one. He never calls me. And I picked up my phone, and I was standing just in the building to my right, and he said, "Logan, are you sitting down?" I'm like, what is this, a movie? Who says that? So I sat down, and Harvey's a great storyteller, but he said it like this. He goes, "Logan, when you came to Minnesota to present on your book, Going Right, do you remember what I said to you at the airport when I dropped you off?" And to be honest, I didn't remember. And he was sharing with me that he was sort of moved by the presentation, and he knew that he had to double down on his career, kind of go all in. And he did, and I assumed he did, and that was nothing new. But he said, after doing that, it was hard. We were both struggling through the pandemic, trying to find a way to keep our careers alive. And he said, yesterday I got a call from Gabe Kapler, manager of the San Francisco Giants. And I want to tell you, Logan, and he's got tears in his eyes, and he kind of got emotional, and he said, "I'm going to the big leagues." And as a player, I mean, both of us, since we were 5 years old, were trying to figure out how to get to the big leagues. And he got tapped on the shoulder to be recognized for his work in the sport, and was going to be on the staff for the San Francisco Giants. And I sort of sat there and had a moment. And I feel forever bonded to Harvey. He is a unique person. There's nobody like him. And I think you'll really appreciate this conversation, whether you have a connection to the sport of baseball or not. Please enjoy this episode with Harvey Martin. Harvey Martin, we're here. We're in the, if you're watching this podcast, the background has changed a lot. So we're in the North Campus of Deuce Gym, and we're in the Strike store specifically, and that has changed a bunch. So set and setting. It's also the loudest podcast studio in the country. So stand by for the dropping bars and the Harleys going by. I'm stoked you're here, brother. Yeah. You drove 6 hours to be here.
I did, 6:15.
And I'm already messing up my flow. I usually dive right in. So weird question off the top. Can you tell me about booking commercial flights chronically and never getting out of the airport? Can you tell me about that?
Well, the irony of that, I guess, if we're going to put it all together here in story form, is that I drove here and opted out of a commercial flight.
Right.
And
did you relapse?
No, that's the funny thing.
Okay.
Is that I fly so much now,
right,
that I've forgotten the road. I used to be such a road warrior.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to be said about being on the road. So I wanted to drive here today. But as far as, and we can see where that takes us, as far as the commercial flights, and this is where it's going to be hard for me because I can't remember the exact years, but it was around 10 years ago. So we'll put it that. We'll put it in the mid-20s. 35, we'll call it mid-20s. We'll give myself a little leeway. We say we dip into 27, right?
27 years of age.
Yeah. And so we're somewhere in there. And I had, okay, here it comes. Yeah,
coming back to
it's working its way through. And I remember I was going through some stuff already in my life, which is what has led me into a career health-wise. But I was flying to Detroit from Minnesota one day. And in that moment, I was flying into Chicago. And I'm on this big international flight at the time. So it should be like a 45-minute flight from Minnesota to Chicago. Layover in Chicago, we're going to go to Detroit. And we're just taking this huge bird, right? So like those things should be like sitting on the lazy boy of some really nice, cozy living room. Smooth ride. And and it was smooth the whole way. But then as we're getting ready to land, the pilot comes on. He goes, "Hey, a little bumpy coming down. But don't worry about it, you know?"
Yeah.
And
he has to say, don't worry about it. Right?
So, and I've learned in life that interpretation is never accurate. The person you're talking to or yourself, I feel. So this interpretation of what I'm about to say next could be an incredible lie. but from how I remember this moment was I was on the wing, on the left wing.
Right.
And I don't know there's this guy on the right wing, but at the time there was a guy on the right wing.
Okay.
And I have no one sitting next to me. I'm on the window seat. I have middle seats open and aisle seats open. And all of a sudden I'm seeing clouds and we're starting to feel some bumps. We're starting to dance a little bit.
Right.
And then out of nowhere, my window sees Lake Michigan. And from right after this, I no longer see Lake Michigan and I see Chicago. Now I'm looking out downtown Chicago. I'm looking out the exact same window. And so how is it that I'm seeing in a massive city and then 15 seconds I'm seeing a massive lake? And so from my recollection of what was happening is this bird is just being like swayed in the air. Yeah, it's getting tossed and you're seeing like these drastic changes because the plane's being pushed around. And I had never really been on a plane with that much turbulence. So we land and me and this guy look at each other and just start dying laughing. like
had a moment.
Like a pure panic. Yeah. We were just holding on and all of a sudden we see each other and we just let it rip. Never met this guy, never said hi to him afterwards. We just start laughing.
You've been through some stuff together.
Yeah. So then I get off the plane and I'm doing like an hour-long layover in Chicago, and now I'm by myself. I'm no longer laughing with this guy, and I'm sitting there, and it's storming in Chicago, and they're on the mic, and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna try to get fast as we can out here because if we don't hit these times, like, we're gonna have to shut down the flights because of the weather." Mm-hmm. And I was calling my boys in Detroit. I was like, I think I might just like take a train, or bust it. Like that kind of tripped me out a little bit, what I just went through. And I wasn't really feeling that again. Mm-hmm. But at this point, I don't know what's about to happen over the next couple of years. I get on this flight and I get on it last minute. The pilot's like, "Hey, let's all get seated down. We got to get out of here. We got to get off the ground or we're not going to leave." Right. And we leave, and the takeoff was like 20 minutes of some of the most bumpy experiences you could have, right? Hated it. Yeah. And we get up in the air, and then as most people know, once you're in the air, you're cruising, you're smooth, you're above the clouds, like you're laughing. We're here, we're free flowing. And we get into Detroit. So now I'm gonna just speed it up so we can get to the actual fun parts of how we are as people. We land in Detroit in the last 15 to 20 minutes of this flight. And as I can remember it a little bit, I was sitting in the back of the plane. The plane starts having so much turbulence that bags start coming out from the top.
That's not good.
The bags, the overhead compartments are opening up. Bags are falling down. The lady, I was sitting on an aisle. I had a lady and her boyfriend, her husband, or whatever. She's crying.
Got a rosary out. Maybe.
Yeah, they're all doing the whole bit. And we end up landing, and I tell the story to the night for the boys. Like, I just survived.
Yeah, right.
I build it up.
War story.
Yeah. Now, since then, I've been on like thousands of flights and had turbulence and all these things. So when I say this, like this might have just been some turbulence. And the lady might have just been nervous and maybe not even crying, but maybe I was crying. You know,
maybe you could just see Lake Michigan the whole time.
It's a beautiful lake.
That's right.
You know? And so then I know that in about 5 days, I got to fly back nonstop from Detroit to Minnesota, no layover. In this flight, a couple days later from Detroit to Minneapolis, could not have been a more smooth, clear, sunny out flight. Yeah. And about halfway through the flight, I experienced what I can consider my first ever panic attack. Wow. And I'm on a plane gripping this thing, and no one around me is freaking out. I'm freaking out. And I'm holding onto the armrest of this chair, and the plane's not having any experience of turbulence. And for whatever reason, I was frozen for about whatever that was, 45 to an hour. And I got off that plane. I really didn't tell this to anybody, obviously, for a few years, but I was like, I'm never flying again. So I was like, that's it. That's the career of me flying. I won't do that again. And I got away with it for about 2 years, and I didn't fly. And it's crazy what you will come up with in life to justify your things. So what I mean by that is the amount of like money I turned down over the next 2 years, or opportunities or things in my life that I avoided, and just had some of the most beautiful lies, right? Because no one could know. I mean, I remember I looked up to John Madden because he was riding that.
He
did the tour bus.
He needs to fly.
Yeah, and he had a job. Yeah. So I was sitting there going, okay, I'll just bus everywhere.
Yeah, what am I, better than John Madden?
and here's a story of that. 2 years later, this is when it got to the point where I had to get commercial flights. Somewhere, like I said, in this time frame. A couple years goes by of me kind of dancing around flights, skipping out on stuff, missing opportunities. I'm in the sports industry. If you're going to be in the sports industry, you fly. Yeah. And so I'm kind of denying a lot of stuff at the time. And for Christmas, my parents call me. This is a couple years later. My parents call me. My mom goes, hey, we're going to have to tell you your Christmas present early because we bought you a flight to Florida from Minnesota.
You're screwed.
Yeah. And I'm like, well, this is going to be a tough one to lie about.
Yeah.
You know, so they buy the flight, and she's like, I got to send it to you. It's your Christmas present. Can't wait to see you. And this is how crazy our brains are. At least this is how crazy my brain is and was at the time, for sure. I woke up the day I was supposed to get on this flight. It was supposed to leave at like 9 or 10 a.m. I got up around like 2 or 3 in the morning. In the middle of winter, people who live in the Midwest and Christmas time, Minnesota, Iowa, there can be some dangerous storms. Yeah. I got up around 2, 3 in the morning, got like 2-3 hour nap, and I thought that I could drive to Florida and beat the plane and hide my car at the airport, act like I was coming off. I'm designing this in my mind, you know? And my parents will never know. And then when they drop me back off, I'll just find a way and get in that car and I'll drive back up to Michigan.
You're not going to get a refund. You're just going to like act as if.
I'm just going to play it off.
That's insane.
It's insane. And about 4:30 in the morning, I'm in and there's a time zone difference, right? I think it was like an hour. I think that's a 2 hour, maybe an hour, whatever. It's like 4:30 in the morning. I'm in Iowa, like Des Moines, Iowa, I think. And there's a snowstorm and there's so much ice on the road that my car slides off the highway. Oh, God. And at that point, I freaked out. I started feeling like a second panic attack coming. And I strolled into this casino and I called my mom. And it was the first time I was like, all right, I don't fly. That was the first time I can remember that casino on the side of the highway in Iowa. Down 35 south. And I called my mom and I was like, hey, I haven't been flying for a couple of years. I had a panic. I get nervous. I have this anxiety. So I unload it. And my mom was obviously like caught off guard, only cared about me being safe, right, and just wanted to see her son for Christmas. And so we like game planned it. We were like, all right, drive down. I'll see you in 2 days. Take your time. My buddy, good friend, I just talked to him today, Andy Hillis, who I played ball with. He lived in Nashville, still does. I drove to him. It was like a 12-hour drive. I stayed with him that night. You know, we just ripped a bunch of heaters on the balcony and talked about it because now I'm just telling everybody.
Right. You wouldn't believe this plane.
Yeah, let me tell you something. And so let me tell you why I'm here.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm sitting in a casino.
Yeah, you never had the airbags come down, have you?
Yeah, you don't get it, pal.
Yeah.
You ever seen the city
That's right.
and the lake at the same time?
Through some stuff.
Yeah, so I did it. I drove back a couple days later after Christmas with my mom. My mom actually drove back with me, and it ended up being one of my most memorable road trips with my mom. After Christmas, we drove my truck back from Florida to Minnesota. Then my mom flew home. And then after that is when the cascade of events took place, where I now like started telling people that, and there's a lot of people I know who don't like flying or don't fly.
Right.
It was just a weird thing for me because flying was disrupting what I do for a living. And there's a lot of people that wanted me to do certain things or wanted my help or wanted to help me, whatever. And our networks are global now. Like I have an international network. And so if you plan on being at this speed, you got to fly. And because of that, there was like, how much longer was I going to kind of be able to hold this off? And once I broke the lie, I just started telling people. And my good friend, speaking of international, Dave Fisher, who coaches hockey in Austria at the time, currently he played hockey in Austria at the time. He really pushed me. I can't remember how it worked, but one night we were sitting in my apartment and he bought me a ticket or I bought the ticket. I can't remember exactly how it went, but I started buying flights from Minneapolis to Chicago. And my friend Nolan Johnson, good friend, college teammate, good friend to this day, he would fly with me. And like we'd set up, like one time we went and watched a Cubs game, and then we'd hang out in Chicago for a few days and fly back. And the first time I went on a flight after that, it was so wild. It's so wild to think about now. I was crying with my buddy who's holding my hand to walk me onto this plane. I'm crying as I'm walking down the aisle of the plane. And you've been on planes, like people are like, what's up with this guy?
Yeah.
I'm flying the whole time until we're getting ready to take off. I'm like shaking. I don't want to do this. I'm trying to breathe, getting all this stuff. And then we get up in the air and it was like I felt like a little kid. I looked at my buddy who thankfully, this is why people are friends, very non-judgmental, incredibly supportive. And I looked at him. I'm no longer crying. And I'm like, so this is it, huh?
Yeah. Yeah, made a big deal about this, huh?
So we're just flying?
Yeah.
Like, what time's the ball game? And it was like, so what I did, like all things that I've learned about psychology and exposure to things, is I started mapping out duration of flights. So it was like, that was the closest flight that I could get back and forth. That was like pretty cheap.
Right.
And I could rip that 45, 60-minute flight regularly. And I knew people in Chicago, and obviously I was from Minnesota, so I could always get something out of it, whether it's a friendship or hanging out for something. And then I stretched the flights. And this will actually be cool to talk to you about specifically, because I went to Chicago and back, and then I stretched it to Florida and back, because that's about a 2-hour flight. I ripped through that for a few times until I kept getting better, like getting repetition. The big one for me was LA, and I came out to LA in 2018.
Right. Oh, when we met.
Yeah, when we met.
Oh, so that was your first long
flight.
Wow.
And I did that one by myself and came out here, had a great 5 days. I flew back. And then right after that, then it was like a drug. I just was like, and I went to Amsterdam with Nolan.
Yeah.
Nolan and another buddy of Tom. We went and saw Dave play hockey.
Okay.
I flew all around Europe, and I just kind of kept building it up.
Yeah.
And it was, that was kind of
there's so many nodes off that story. I didn't even know the full story. So it's awesome to hear. But one of the connection points there is, when I first learned that you were doing this, it was like you were experimenting with yourself. You're buying these flights because it's the shortest one you can tolerate to practice. Yeah. Working through this anxiety, this fear that was coming up. And, that dovetails in reverse in your life story to your career as a ball player, which anxiety, I don't want to put that word into your mouth, but this type of thing manifested differently with something we call the yips, right? Which is a very specific, you can give context to that. But I just want to point out that we do a lot of work with a woman called Sarah Baldwin, somatic therapist.
I feel like you've talked to me.
Yeah, she's incredible.
Yeah.
a perspective on being human, the physiology of being a human being from a central nervous system perspective. And she talks about like action steps on managing traumatic experiences or stress, or just basically the way that we are in the world with what she calls taking the next tolerable step in your development, right? And so that was, in terms of flying, that was like you were doing this thing that is sort of being validated from a scientific perspective. That's super interesting. Go back and tell me a little bit about your experience at the end of your baseball career, and then what's the same about that experience with the yips, reconciling that to this practice that you took on with flying, because I think that that's where you're sort of realizing from a self-awareness perspective, I had this breathing thing going on. It's maybe manifesting as something that I didn't know was present. And so as I understand it, those two events helped you understand a story about, what is breathing through my mouth doing to me? And flash forward 10 years later, you're this sort of subject matter expert in the world talking about many things, but largely informed by that.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would, because I'll forget to touch on this when I go into that thought process, but I talk to my wife about this a lot, because my professional success and the things, a lot of times you have the idea that it comes naturally, as it should, comes from like your curriculum or your resume or things that you've experienced. It's fascinating because to me, like most of the reason why I've had success professionally is because I got myself to fly. And it's like, try saying that in like an interview, or like explaining that to the world. It's like, well, I feel like my confidence has come from a tolerable experience of flying. And I say that because naturally that I think this will dovetail into the process of like what the whole point of who you are is, and the process of peeling into who you are. And a lot of times taking a chance on your gut and understanding what that feeling is to expose yourself to more of who you are. And I think that opens up your consciousness to be perceived, I guess, at this point in my life as an expert in a certain thing. Now, how that kind of correlates to baseball in that experience is I never experienced really anxiety or a panic attack or depression until the end of my baseball career. I played baseball, played sports my whole life. And the fascinating thing about my career is I signed professionally because I was known as a strike thrower. I was a guy who commanded the zone, threw strikes, had really good mechanics, and I was able to do these things. I had one day in spring training in 2015 where I started feeling wasn't throwing balls in a bullpen, but I felt like I didn't know where the ball was going. And I'd never had that feeling before. I had misses here and there, but I never was like, what's that, And I still got away with it for a couple of days. And then one day I threw a ball in the left-hander's batter's box and I spiked it. And no coach, no one noticed it. Catcher didn't notice it, but I noticed it, right? Mm-hmm. And the next bullpen I threw, the whole bullpen, all I could think about was not throwing a ball in the left-hander's batter's box. And I threw like 6 balls of 30 balls in the left-hander's batter's box. Right. And that night I was in my hotel room with my roommate and I was telling him, like, I threw a bullpen today and had no idea where one of those balls was going. And he saw what his eyes saw. He's like, that was a really good bullpen. You threw the ball, like it was fine. Like, yeah, he spiked a few, but it wasn't that bad. You know what I mean? Like, is
that a perception thing? Like you were internalizing reality differently, or what?
That's why I think that's where I'm fascinated with what interpretation is in general, because I felt something for months before the yips came. And for months, the unfairness of a coach or a teammate or a catcher, what I was saying to them for months, I was telling people from crying for help for months.
And they're like, you're fine.
Yeah. Cause what was visibly seen was fine.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing with like the flying. Like that wasn't like one day. That wasn't that flight that I had it all. It was just finally it broke. Right. But it was like an accumulation of years of having this anxiety. Cause I really experienced an anxiety feeling chronically for about 3 to 4 years in that mid-20 range. Okay. And that's where it started exposing itself outside of baseball. Like the same feeling I had on a mound with the yips was the exact same feeling I felt on a fight. It was the same thing. Same thing I would have when I would talk to a group of people and I would freeze and I couldn't coach or teach what I was doing for a living. I mean, I had a panic attack one day before I started work and I just froze and I like couldn't say words. It was really fascinating. That happened for like that 3 to 4 year window. And when I got the yips in baseball, it got to, that was probably February that happened. I got released in June. So you got like a 6-month buffer period. In baseball, anyone who knows that sport, you don't have a day off. So that's a 6-month chronic tap of fear. And it just kind of kept like building. Does that make sense? So it just kept building up. And then I had one day where it was small in spring training where I was like, don't throw the ball in the left-hander's batter's box. 6 months later, it was like, don't hit that guy in the head. And I would hit him in the head, or like, don't throw this ball 40 feet in front of the plate. And I would throw a ball 40 feet in front of the plate. Or there's a batting cage that they'll put around for simulated games. And if people go to, the turtle, if people see a major league game, will see these turtles. I threw a ball outside of that. Wow. And it was just, I explained it as Space Jam. If you remember that movie back in the day where they take their powers and put them in the ball, I couldn't play baseball. And
just to like double tap on that for folks that are listening that aren't in the baseball community. So from a pitcher's perspective, what Harvey's talking about is called command.
Yeah.
And he's saying, your words, that you're a command guy. Like the reason why you're valuable and that you have this contract is because you do command really well. Mm-hmm. Harvey doesn't get away with, throwing 100 and missing a spot, and that's how he's sort of having success. He's having success because he puts the ball where he wants it. Plate's what, 16 inches across?
Yeah, 16.
17 to 16 inches across. I mean, the feeling of competing at this level is putting a baseball where you want it within like parts of an inch type of accuracy, and we call that feel. Like having incredible feel. Like you know what you're doing and you have command over what you're doing. And then this experience comes in that sort of eats away at that. And the type of deviation you're talking about away from optimal feel is hard to relate to another thing. It would kind of be like trying to drive a car like in your commute and then just not being able to even be on the right side of the road. It would be like you're no longer playing baseball. You're doing a different thing altogether. I've had the yips before. Some people recover from it, some people don't. But it is this thing, and as you talk, I'm hearing you work through this like mental part. And there's a lot of theories about whether it begins physical or mental or both or whatever. But, I would have these experiences as a catcher, so opposite position. I'm receiving pitches from a person like Harvey, where if a runner stole, I could do this quick action and put a ball on the equivalent of my dinner plate, 16 inches target at max velocity across the field and do this thing quite accurately with my version of the yips. But throwing the ball back to the pitcher was nearly impossible. Like to the point where like walking partway out to the mound and trying to like, right.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah, you've seen it. Yeah.
Seen it.
And so my experience as you're reflecting on the story is sort of like that mental part. You're like, okay, just don't hit the ball in the head. Right. And then you just manifest this thing that you would do anything to avoid. And it perpetuates itself in a scary way.
It's very scary.
And the phenomenon that Harvey's talking about, our mutual friend, Tim Brown wrote The Man. Wrote an incredible book called The Phenom about what's the fellow's name again? Pitcher Rick Ankiel, pitcher that had this exact experience and then couldn't do it ever again. He had to change positions or whatever. And what you're talking about is so powerful amongst the baseball community is that people won't talk to you. They don't want to sit next to you. If you say the word yips, like they're going to get their tray and move away from you because it feels like this contagion thing.
I've thought about how many people wouldn't want to hear this conversation.
Oh yeah.
Like this is an untouchable.
Yeah, you turn it
combo.
off.
Yeah. I don't want to hear that. Right.
So okay, all that color commentary to say, do you ever recover from that? Do you just put that in a file in the back of your mind, like, oh, that was an interesting time, and now I'm on these planes, and
Yeah.
you're realizing that there's something similar about them. Where do you go from there?
Yeah, I mean, I spent the last couple of years coaching in San Francisco at the Giants, and it's going back to the plane thing. I play show catch, and for show catch, for people who are listening don't understand, and if you've ever been to a major league game, you'll see people throw in front of the dugout instead of the outfield, right? And you'll throw basically on the either along the first baseline or the third baseline.
Right.
And I do that every day, or did it every day, with one of our coaches, Ryan Kirchison, the man, bench coach. Yeah, he's the man, big rhino. Call him Rolling Hills. And I would play catch with him. And I say that because I played catch and I wanted to be in the big leagues for so many reasons as a coach to play show catch. And whether or not that does anything for me in my life financially or whatever is beyond the point. The fact is that I've played catch on a major league field with the yips in my mind, and I've done it this past summer 162 days.
Right.
And I think that that's the same exact point of the flying, because I have not the experience or the memory, the trauma, if you will, it hasn't ever gone away. I still feel it. Like if we went out and played catch out here, I would still feel it. I'd be able to throw with you, but I would feel it. Like
I would feel it too.
Yeah, I would feel it right away. And I think the point of tolerable exposure is to minimize it until you can all of a sudden be able to not necessarily control it, but you can maneuver around it, or you can live within it, and you can get through it. Like I know I have one throw I have to do when I play catch, my yip throw, and I just get it over with within the first 3 throws. And once it's out of me, I can play catch free. And
So
I can
you airmail it.
just get it out of me.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, and I think like when you're not playing, or you have tools or you have systems or mechanisms that you can trust, that's how I think you manage it. Where it manifested in my life was, like I told you, it started to show itself in panic, and in the flights was specific. I think what I've dove into, and this is, I'm sure you've wanted to talk about this or want to talk about this, where I dove into is that I had an illness around the same time. I don't want to say I almost died from it, but I had some moments where I was like, I was, some doctors, and we're talking, I had a cyst grow on my neck, and it was right on one of my arteries, and it clogged my throat. And I had a night where I was basically like suffocating. So I have this random night where I do an instant surgery. They get this cyst out of my neck. I can breathe again. Right. And the reasoning why I share that quick tidbit is because when I came out of that surgery, I couldn't make it through the night without waking up regularly, because I was breathing through my mouth so heavily, and my tongue would dry. That was kind of graphic, but my tongue was like it felt like it looked and felt like cement.
Yeah.
It would get so white and dry and crackly, and I was just, all night. And I started taping my mouth shut, and it took me about a 3 to 4 week process for my mouth for my body to adapt to having tape on it.
Was that intuitive, or someone told you to do that?
At the time, that was largely intuitive.
That's crazy.
Crazy.
What year is that?
Like we're looking 2016,
right.
2015.
Okay.
It would have had to have been before 2017, because 2017 is when I started Mind Strong, and that was when I was like, I'm going full tilt.
Right.
I'm trying to understand physiology.
Right.
But what happened was, then I started being able to sleep through the night. I stopped peeing regularly. I stopped snoring. I was taping my mouth, and it was like, and people who are listening to this who have had anxiety or have it right now, you're probably going, like I know what he's talking about. The way I explain it is, when you have like a chronic anxiety or a really fight or flight sympathetic nervous system, where you're chronically living in these fight or flight fear states, the way I consider is like, you feel like your nervous system, like your spine, all the tension in your body is like gripped constantly, and it's in a cage. And then all of a sudden, when I started to sleep through the night and I was breathing through my nose, about 3-4 months later, I started to realize I didn't feel as gripped. And then about 6 months later, I didn't feel like I was gripped. And then about a year later, I wasn't gripped. And then 18 months later, I was like having memories come back. And then I could retain information. And then I was able to read and understand what I was reading. And then I was able to not, my stomach didn't hurt when I would get done eating. And like all these things changed.
Yeah.
And I was also pairing that with a lot of cold exposure. I was doing breath work regularly.
I was when you were with Kenzen and Didon and all that.
Didon and all these guys. And yeah, it was just so profound how my body changed and the feeling of how my body changed that I was in a state of my life where I didn't have anything to lose. I was single. I was sleeping in my buddy's closet, as you know, Stevie boy. I wasn't making any money, but I was tied to nothing. And I committed. I was starting to fly. I was starting to fly over the world, essentially, and starting to fly over the country to meet people like yourself. This was probably when it took off, 2017, 2018, 2019. And I just exposed myself to I had no interest of really helping anybody besides myself. I just knew that every flight I took, I felt more comfortable in who I was. I knew that every night I slept peacefully, I stopped being gripped by this tension. I knew that now all of a sudden I was curious, I was healthy, I had this vitality of energy that was like sustainable. And these things were just happening. And I was like, what is this? And like, I hadn't felt that in years.
Yeah.
And I was able to throw a baseball again. And I just, with like a friend, it wasn't anything serious. Yeah. And it was like, all these things kind of kept coming. And I remember the exact comment when I got done sauning and doing a cold tub at Didon's house. And I remember saying to him, I said, I'm not going to do anything else but this, because this is what makes me happy. And this makes me healthy, and this makes me happy, and it gives me energy to think. And I haven't felt like I've had the space to think in 4 or 5 years. And I didn't care about anything else. Now, granted, I didn't really have any responsibilities, but I just went all in on how do I keep being less gripped?
Yeah.
How do I keep being free?
That's such a paradox, because I feel like we're living in, obviously we're square in the middle of this information age, and, with the digital thing, that's kind of what's always around us. And with that comes, I think, this reward system where everybody feels like they have to be the thought leader, and they're trying to be the person on socials and all that. And yourself, I sort of summarize your whole story that we just heard, and I've always thought this about you, which is like, you're such an N=1 participant in your own life, and it's no surprise that folks who dive into their work fully like that, usually for this N=1 selfish, internal, not externalized reasons, become the greatest teachers. I think a lot of people that we've been exposed to that are also, doing something specific and teaching something important in the world started from this need of like, figuring out how to run. It's like BMAC, right? He meets Dr. Romanoff because he wants to run far, and he's can't stop hurting himself, and you have a real need to find a way to tolerate being a human, the physiology of being a human. And then it leads you down this rabbit hole to where you understand this on a level that is really helpful to other people, but it always starts with the self, in some way.
Yeah, that's a really cool point. And I really appreciate those words. I'm not going to just dance over the meaning of that. So thank you.
Yeah.
I think as I've gotten older, and I've taught a lot of people now, and fortunately I've had a lot of cool experiences and been able to do a lot of cool things for teaching things like breath work and talking about modalities that come from nature. What's fascinating to me, and I've gotten more comfortable with this, but the more that you can connect and understand, it's not yourself necessarily. Like, I don't think of it as like, I know these things. It's a thing where I don't know these things. And if you are quiet enough and you pay attention enough, your gut will tell you what to do. Like, it will tell you this is the right decision. And I just shared this the other day because one of my things that really hit me in the face over the last 6 months was, have you ever read the Socrates, what's it, the Plato, The Last Apology, I think it's called?
I don't think so.
It's before Socrates is about to die, or he already dies. He gets sent off, he gets killed, and he has this thing, and Plato writes a piece about it. But Socrates has this thing he calls it his daemon. And from my understanding of it, Socrates would say that his daemon is basically his intuition, his gut, his feeling. And he would say, my daemon doesn't tell me what to do. It tells me what not to do. And I really like that because, you know, I might fall on my face in certain things, and I've definitely failed a lot. And I've struggled in business, and I've struggled making material things. I've made decisions I wish I wouldn't have. I have plenty of regrets. I have certain things that I wish I would have done differently. One of the things that I don't want to lose, but I want to keep coming back to, and I say this because of the information era, because it's really intimidating to listen to the thing inside of you telling you what not to do. And I think that's for whatever reason, there's something about that being the gift. And I think you have to go through all these trials and tribulations to get closer to that voice and knowing that there's no end to it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so when I talk about breathing, I spend a significant amount of time where, okay, I come back, I've broken this anxiety thing. And now I want to share that with the world because I want you to not suffer either, right? And I'm going to know all the information, and I'm going to be an expert, and I'm going to tell you, change you. And the worst thing that happened to me was it was like a hockey stick analogy I always call it. It's like I spent like 6-7 years, no one wanting to talk to me, listen to me. And then all of a sudden in a year I sped up. In 2021, my life changed drastically. Mm-hmm. And in 2022, I was an expert.
Right.
Publicly.
Right.
And it was like, wait a minute. In 2020, I was just on a hike by myself, breathing. People would talk to me, do these sort of things. In 2022, I'm an expert. I'm being published to write books. Right. I'm being flown all around the country. I'm being paid. People are calling me an expert, all these sort of things, right? And what's interesting about that, I've never gone back to where I was a decade ago in my health-wise, but that really pierced me because what happened in the era of wanting to know things and thinking that you know things, that was actually the least favorite time of the last decade. Was when I was perceivably successful and perceivably this expert. And I didn't like it at all because what it had done was it took me away from that voice. Like it took me away from the pure need of knowing who I am and being who I am and not trying to change anything. Not ever trying to fight to change the world because that's what you want to do, right? You want to restructure society. You want to show the fact that like, why did I grow up and not eat strong food? Why did I eat sugar and formulated food and processed food my entire life? Why did I have allergies my whole life? Why was I a mouth breather early? Why did no one adjust my jaw or teach me about my teeth? And why did no one show me the importance of breathing well and moving well and the importance of sleep and the process of being overstimulated? Why didn't I get all that? And then when all of a sudden you feel like you have that, the only thing you want to do is make the world be that, right? And why I brought the Socrates thing up, because I feel like I'm learning this right now in the moment, is it's finding the fight that's worth pursuing that you never need to win. And I think that is the fight of yourself. Like, it's just to understand more of how you move and how you are in reality. And in the midst of that, like, sure, I'll go all night with you, all the rounds, and talk about health. Yeah. But you can waste a lot of time only trying to put more information into information.
Yeah. I think there's a paradox there that, and maybe it's seasons or maybe it's a paradox. How I relate to what you're saying is I felt like for the first 24 years of my life, I was quiet and listening. And I really enjoyed that period of my life. And then when I was 24, I started what is now Deuce Gym in the park. And I felt like I had something to say. I was like, I've been listening for a minute and I like have something to say. And then you shift roles to like this teacher role, which sometimes can be a runaway train. It's ironic to be on a podcast right now because it seems like that's what I'm doing right now. Yeah. But a lot of what feels intuitive to me is almost like I just want to listen again. Yeah. You know?
That's how I felt in 22.
And here's like the curveball that I'm curious about your thoughts on. I have a belief that maybe you can just check me on this, where it's like, I think we need a context to learn ourselves. And this can go down the rabbit hole of the characters we play, which is a conversation that I think you lead really well. But if you never fell in love with baseball, and it could have been anything, and that's the part that I think people don't hear when I say this, is like, it's not a sports conversation. It's not a baseball conversation. It's like, can you fall in love with a context strong enough that you would go to the extreme to where you're now noticing? Think about what you were noticing. I'm noticing that my breaking ball is off 8 inches.
Yeah.
That level of awareness only shows up in the context of, I stand on this slab and I put pitches 60 feet, 6 inches away where I want, when I want them. And I've trained years to have that skill. And then noticing this deviation is like such a heightened level of awareness, right? Could have been hockey. It could have been writing, like whatever. But now you're learning yourself. It's a context to learn yourself. Now it's like almost like wave a magic wand. Harvey's born, you're 0 years old, and then all of a sudden you're 24, 25 years old, and then you kind of just showed up to school and you didn't really tackle anything. It's like maybe the mirror isn't close enough to learn yourself. And then maybe we just get older and we kind of stay out of the game too much to ever really have these confronting conversations or experiences, you know what I mean? And all that to say is, to get to the end of a pursuit, like for you and I, it just so happened to be baseball, to get to the end of it and say, oh, like none of that really mattered in the way that we thought, but you had to go through it like it did to get the message. You know what I mean? I
know what you mean. I do. I think that's very well said. I think that's the point of, from my understanding of it, right? We suffer because the human experience is mixed in duality. It's in a paradox. So you can be, like I just said, like I was into this spot where I felt like I understood my daemon. Mm-hmm. I was understanding what not to do. And to me, in my 20s, it was like, don't go get a job because you're not healthy. Mm-hmm. So you need to do these things. Then all of a sudden those things mixed with the era of, okay, I know these things and there's a platform to talk about it. So I'm really attached to the information, and I spend a significant amount of time super into, okay, here it is, what it is, attach. And then I got to what you just said. Then I was like, what? I can't even hear my daemon now. Now I don't even know how I learn again. I forgot how to learn. I forgot how to listen. I forgot how to observe. And so then I stepped out. And now I'm on a podcast with you. Now I'm stepping slightly in, but it's like, well, what am I stepping into? Who am I? What did I just pick up from being fully in, fully out? I don't think there's any difference of being fully in, fully out. I think it's what you're saying about going all in regardless of it, right?
Yeah.
Now, I want your thoughts on, if I think of, let's just put the framework of, there's a duality in life, there's good and bad, we can't get outside of it. That's the mix of human suffering as an experience. I have to have these paradoxes. And what I think, to what you said, that stands out to me is, there's a time and a place where you coach baseball in Major League Baseball and you really believe that season mattered. Yeah. And you go all in on thinking this thing matters. Yeah. If we lose, I'm going to go home and can't wait to tell you tomorrow I couldn't sleep last night because we lost today against the Royals in July. Yeah. You know, and I can't even move. I'm so stressed out. I'll be here tomorrow, you know. Yeah. But then you step out of it and you realize, like, that doesn't matter at all. And I think that's really hard on our psyche, to know that everything matters while simultaneously nothing matters. And when you get radical on one side or the other, I think that gets really dangerous. But then how do you know that they are needed without going to one side of the other radically at some point in your life? Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. That's why I think you need a context to do this, because this is the classic. One of the things I have written down here, and maybe we'll touch back on this, but it's like the monk in the monastery. Mm-hmm. idea, right? It's like you can go to theoretical and you can go and sit and meditate in the monastery and never leave and find enlightenment. And then, but for what? Because now you have this capacity that doesn't live in the real world anymore.
Right.
So which is it? Do you walk around, pay taxes, have a job, drink a bunch of coffee, and just live a normal life? Or do you find it like intellectual enlightenment? Which one is it? And I think this non-dual thing is, can we be a person with 2 feet on the ground, pay taxes, and also reach towards this developmental, enlightenment's not the right word, but developmental higher place, right?
Yeah, and you can use enlightenment too if it feels it.
Yeah, and you can use enlightenment. I think the paradox is if you find a thing that you can create meaning in, you are taught the lesson that seems obvious in some context to maybe you or I, that you do need to have both. I'm not particularly religious, but I like to use religion to not always talk about sports. It's like Christianity, as I understand it, only works because of a similar paradox, which is the mandate is to live like Christ, who is the only idealistic human to ever live.
Right.
Perfection. Live like him. And then you try, and then everyone can't.
Right.
And then you deviate from this thing, repent, revisit. And that is the design of practice. Seek idealism, fall below idealism, reconcile the difference. And that process is the point.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so now,
That's beautiful.
beating the Royals on a Saturday in August, you have to play the game like it matters maximally.
Right.
To internalize the higher lesson, which is that this doesn't matter at all. If you don't attack it with the meaning, whether it's artificial or real, or I'm not philosophical enough to make that call here with you here now, you don't get to benefit from the back end of non-attachment.
I agree.
You see what I mean?
Yeah, I do.
Because no one makes it to the major leagues with a hands-off thing that says nothing matters, results don't matter, whatever. It's the paradox of attacking this like the results matter that leads you to the process. And that is the ultimate paradox of performance. This is what we talk about in the Hold the Standard Summit, which is like, what a joke on humanity that God or some higher power or our creator, whatever, put the human being in, which is to maximize our place, performance, our expression in life is a result that is largely outside of our control. So if you desire that, the irony is that the only way to taste this desire is to focus not on the desire, but on the process that would have that desire ensue from. Right. Mm-hmm. And so that's why I think you and I resonate. I mean, you're one of my best friends, and you're one of these relationships in my life where it's like, you're one of my best friends somehow, and we've also spent time together 8, 10, we haven't been together that much, but I think part of it is that bond of, we sat down at the table, tried to do the thing maximally, and then because of that effort, walked away from it with a little bit more objectivity that could be transferred to other things. And I don't know, I look at you and the characters that you're playing with, you have an interesting amount of non-attachment. I don't want to say publicly, put words in your mouth, that you don't care, right? Because you work for these organizations that are billion-dollar organizations that are trying to win a world championship, because you do care. And I think you have this interesting perspective where it's the objectivity that we're all hoping for.
Right.
I can approach this job with more objectivity than I think we remember having, where we were very subject to baseball. It was happening to us. And that approach, I think, is you only arrive there by going through this process of meaning.
Well, I think that, sometimes I feel, talking to my best friend in a moment of really working through that, what you just said is oftentimes where I feel my most lonely. And it's bothered me a lot in my working career because it's a delicate dance, right?
Which part is lonely? That you can't say out loud that this game doesn't matter?
Yeah, well, oftentimes I do, and then
you get in trouble.
Yeah, you get in
That's
trouble.
Right. Yeah.
You get slapped.
Harv gets a little slap on the
Harv's
wrist.
got to go for a walk.
Yeah.
And no, it's a concept because a lot of times, when you spend a lot of times, if I can go back to just to touch it, Jim Carrey has this really cool thing that resonated with me a long time ago. It really helped me, actually. And he talked about how he was going through a depression after a couple of his movies. And it felt like when he got out of the depression, he took off the mask. Mm-hmm. And he was saying, when you are depressed, he called it a deep rest. And it was because your body and mind was tired of upholding the character of playing these things. And he was tired of, I don't want to say what he meant, but how I heard it was he essentially was tired of performing for people, and he didn't get to be Jim Carrey, and there is no Jim Carrey. And so he was saying, when you get out of a depression, you realize that your avatar got tired and you were just kind of nothing. Right. And then there's this, like, the paradox of the nothing is that you're everything.
Right.
And it's freeing, right? That's sort of how I felt a long time ago when I was leaving baseball, is I didn't understand what life was without baseball specifically. And I know a lot of athletes and performers go through this, but your first year when you go into an off season, for example, and you're not playing for the first time ever in your life, and you go to Thanksgiving and you realize that people don't know how to talk to you because you have identified with your training and what you do and what baseball is and how your life works. And you run back your conversation regularly. And, I spent a little while in this phase where I didn't know how to not be a baseball player. And it was very difficult. And what came out of that in the radical side was I realized, I remember this thought specifically. I was 26 years old. I got released. And I went, okay, I'm 26. Let's just make up a number and say Harvey lives to be 90. And I remember one of the scariest thoughts I've had in my life was so for the next 60 years, I'm not going to have meaning to the level that I just had trying to play Major League Baseball. So I have to go live for 60 years without something to chase. Because when you first get out of it, I didn't know. I only chased trying to play Major League Baseball my whole life. Yeah. And everything was consumed by that. And so then when that was no longer there, I didn't know who I was. I looked at life in that grand scheme of things, and I went, well, what am I going to do for 60 years? I have no meaning. And that's a very nihilistic way to live. That's meaningless. And it can be very, very scary. And I speak from experience of that. It's a very intimidating place to be. Now, as I put those pieces together, that took a little time for me, but the pieces came back together and I found meaning eventually. And I wouldn't know how to describe what meaning is, but I just found an excitement to exist. But that thought that I just told you has never left. Like I feel, I wouldn't say I know. I feel as if this thing that I'm doing while I'm alive from birth to death, this character that I play, inside of that is this spirit, soul, energy that the more I get to know it, it's like, it's I don't know if confidence would be the right word, but it's fun. It excites me. And so then I go, okay, well, I speak for a living. I've made a lot of money speaking over my life. I've spoke a lot of places in the world. I'm terrified to speak. I get nervous every time.
Yeah, same, yeah.
I'm speaking at a university in a month from now. I'm already nervous about it. The only reason why I really like speaking is because every time I speak, the euphoric feeling of it, it's like a drug, and it's natural, and it challenges me to get to the next level, the next checkpoint. And so what I think that when you're attached to these roles in life, you get to play them with ease. You get to play them as you get to know more of you. And how does that not become exciting? How does that not become some drive of curiosity to go, Harvey's afraid of talking in front of people. He's nervous to talk in front of people. Harvey should find a way to talk in front of people. And however that looks, you tolerate it. Back to the beginning of the podcast, you tolerate the exposure that you can handle, and you expose yourself to it, and you gently attach to it, and you create meaning to it, and you do it, and you do it, and you do it, while the whole time knowing you're just playing a game.
But you're lucid dreaming, like, you're dreaming kind of thing. Like, what I mean by that, not dreaming, that you're playing these characters. Most people are so subject to that they can't dissociate from this idea that they aren't a ball player, or they aren't a coach, or they aren't a author, or whatever their thing is. And you've arrived at that place through hook or crook. You arrived at this thing, probably pain of being 26 and realizing, well, if I'm not a ball player, then I'm just a discount Harvey for the next 60 years. Like, and it's crazy that this happened to me on accident, and it was explained to me as a way to do this on purpose. Can I share with you why transitioning out of baseball wasn't that painful to me? Because I think, well, let me ask you this. I might draw it. Did you ever consider being anything other than a baseball player?
Growing up?
Yeah.
No.
Not really, right?
No.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So
I tried to think of something.
You said it just how I'm going to draw it, but you said this birth till death life experience. And that's what I just drew on this piece of paper. It's like a line, birth on the left, death on the right. What I'm about to show you is a conceptualized observation of what Viktor Frankl talks about, Man's Search for Meaning.
Beautiful book.
Yeah. His example is quite dark. He's talking about the Holocaust, of course, and observing not the people who were killed by execution, but the people who died of, quote unquote, like, it's tough to say, natural causes in a concentration camp. That's not really appropriate to say either. But people who didn't make it. Yeah. And what he observed was that they often created a future time period that they would be out of this hell, right? And so I drew a circle around this timeline, and the circle can represent any period in our lives. And for you and I, that would be, maybe in this example, being a baseball player.
Sure.
So it starts someplace after we're born, and then it ends someplace before we die. And when you're a player, you're right in the middle of it. You don't know when it's going to end. Right. You knew when it started, but you don't know when it's going to end. And our example is quite positive, whereas the Holocaust example is quite dark. He observed that the people who did really well and survived through shocking conditions could imagine a specific, a non-specific future reality where they would say something to themselves like, we're going to get out of here, and I'm going to be old, and I'm going to live in a village, and there's going to be a garden at my house, and I'm going to have grandkids, and I'm going to sit on the porch, and we're going to eat berries together. I don't know when or how I'm going to get there, but that's a future that I can see. Yeah. It's sort of like jumping ahead to like someplace beyond the experience of, for them, the camps, and for us being a baseball player. Because it doesn't pay to think about your next career while you're trying to compete at the highest level, ball players never do that. So you identify as a ball player and then never conceptualize a future reality where you're not that, because that would be distraction, waste of energy.
And not to mention, everyone around you is going to tell you not to do that.
Yeah, and it'll make you a worse ball player.
Right, it'll make you bad. Right.
So I also was like a plan A only guy. Sure. I'm going to be a Major League Baseball player, and that's the only thing I'm doing right now. I'm not hedging bets. I'm not getting a side job in the office. Whatever. This is where I'm headed. And I was like, when I'm done with this sport, I want to be an entrepreneur. I don't care what it's in. I want to make up companies and out of nothing. And that was modeled to me through different folks. And I really wanted to do that whenever that comes.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So then I get released. I'm 24 instead of 44, which I thought I was going to be a, Hall of Fame, Major League, play forever guy. And that transition then is not this frame breaking reality crushing, identity challenging moment, it's sort of just like, oh, well, now I just start doing the other thing. Right. And I sort of accidentally backdoored into this, this less than rigid connection to identity as a ball player, and benefited on accident from this fact.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I don't know what necessarily to do with that other than when it comes up, share about it. But it does give agency to this thing that ultimately I think you talk about really well, which is like, you know, I've been in a room with you with a bunch of other folks in a workshop context, and you talk about having us map out our characters, every character we've ever played. Yeah. And that for you started as like a paper boy, and then you're a student, and then you're a ball player, then you're a professor, then you list all the jobs basically you've had. And one of the most succinct ways that you've said it is like, well, the day after you stopped being a paper boy, like, was it that big of a leap to realize that you're not on this earth as a paper boy, you know, right? But we don't take that same logic into these bigger adult type expressions, you know? And so, I see you as a person who is living sort of in this liberated way from the characters. Like, you're able to walk into Major League Baseball, you're able to walk into the NHL and like play the role. I mean, we were joking before the call where it's like, you know, such and such team wants to call me the sleep expert. You're like, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Whatever, you know, whatever it is.
Play the role.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I don't know, like, how does that feel for you now? Do you feel full non-attachment to that? When you get hired in a gig, do you step into the role and like try it on? I don't know. Tell me about these characters and how you're living with that.
Well said. I thought that the Viktor Frankl, the breakdown of that was phenomenal. And it's always fascinating when I talk to you, because I have to make sure that I go into such a student mode where I can just listen. And you're really simple with the really complex subjects like that. See, I don't know if this is true, but I'm deciding to believe that it is. Okay. Right? So meaning, when I die, I think about this often. I think that ideally I would want to know who I am, right? And can I accept the fact that I'll never know who I am? And this conversation could change in a few years. If I listen to this back, I don't know. But as it stands right now, it's not like I have some super uber confidence. I have massive nerves too, but I have committed to at least trying this on for a while now, right? But before I die, if I look at that chart, at some point I know when the birth is. I can tell you the day, and I can tell you the checkpoints in my life. And I could really break down my life into a matter of moments and tell you how I got to this exact moment. But I don't know when this thing ends. I know it will end materially. My mind and body will go. It'll die. I've seen that happen to people. Obviously, that's real, right? That's a true thing that people die. Yeah. So, okay, that means that's probably going to happen to me as well. And in the meantime, all the decisions I've made in my life, the things that have felt the best in my life have come from within me, have come from feel. They haven't come from pressures outside of me. When I've made the decision on my own feel, my own gut, it's always worked out. And when I make decisions and I have to pay for them, and we've all had to pay for them, and sometimes you got to labor away for a few years, and you've got to deal with these certain things. I think that's part of life as well. But if I make the belief that this is going to end someday, and the only reason to play this thing out materially in my mind and my body that was gifted to me from something, some higher source, higher energy, some sort of cosmic universal gift, ideally I would do my best to meet who I truly am by the time I die, and being okay with knowing I'll never get there. And I think that's the first foundational thought to like chew on, right? And then asking yourself, to what degree do you believe in that? And I will you talked about religion for a second. I've done Sunday chapels and Bible studies for almost 2 decades now on a regular basis. And I've thought about this often in the process of religion. It doesn't have to be Christianity, but let's just call it faith, right? And if I think about faith, if I think about it truly to the depth of what faith is, shouldn't that be the scariest thing imaginable? And if it is the scariest thing imaginable and it breaks me to the point where nothing in the information era really matters, it's just pure truth, and knowing that I don't even know how to say that. I just know there's a feel. There's a humanity moralistic feel of knowing what's right and what's wrong. And there's this thing that is so it's so big, I can't comprehend it. I'll call it faith, and I can share this topic with anybody on the world. And if I'm willing to believe that that's real, it should be scary enough to get me to move. And that movement should get scary enough, but in a positive way, to try on all these roles. So it should be like, I'm about to be a dad. I'm a few months away from being a dad. And the most exciting thing about being a dad is it just feels like a role I'm getting ready to play. And it's going to be put in front of me, and it's going to expose all these things about me that I have yet to meet. So in one side of it, I'm going to have a kid, and that's going to be a human. I'll be responsible for it. Sure, I get that, right? If I think about it incredibly selfishly.
Yeah, I get that.
Yeah, and the impact of me, what part of me am I about to meet that I'm going to have to kill off parts of me that are going to be uncomfortable? And it's going to hurt, and I'm going to have to kill parts of the character I'm playing right now. That sucks. It's pain. You used that word already. But it also, if I've already bought into what I told you, if I think that this is worth pursuing on the path to death, then that seems like something I should do.
For sure.
And I think that a lot of those things have just happened in my life. And I think that when you get to certain checkpoints and you shed the character and you kill off identities that no longer serve you, they're deaths, in my opinion. They're real-time deaths, and you have to kill them. And when you kill them, you grieve them. And then when you grieve them, you have this new level of awareness. And when you have the new level of awareness, you hear the daemon a little bit more. You don't hear it entirely, but you hear it a little bit more. And for whatever reason, that's excited me enough since that decade ago impact. That's excited me enough to just sort of keep going, trying to learn more of who I am.
Yeah. Well, when I'm hearing you say that, what comes to mind is progression. We have a lot of propaganda and dogma. We love to talk about progression here. We love to talk about progression consciously, this transcend and include, verbiage. And that's a big part of the culture here. And as I'm hearing you talk about this essentially game of know thyself, moving through life to meet yourself, I really resonate with that. There's this quote we throw around. I'm paraphrasing. I can't recite it exactly, but it's like, any organization that is truly authentically itself competes against no one. And it's an aspirational thing. But if I reflect back on, let's say, like the evolution of this organization, Deuce, it's like in the beginning, you are doing your best to match the models of excellence that you know. So I was really inspired by a lot of things and a lot of people. Red Black Gym, for example, is this gym that doesn't exist anymore that Jeremy Teal and a lot of coaches that I really admire had in Austin, Texas. That was this old garage, and really showed me what an aesthetic and a sort of like a university of movement could look like. You'd walk into this place and they'd be doing strongman in the back, and then there was a kettlebell expert leading a kettlebell thing on the side, and then a bunch of excellent CrossFitters doing this competitive thing, and it just was really inspiring. And that sort of mashed with my mentor Andy Petronic, who we've had on this season, but that at that level of development, the best I can do is aspire and mimic the models that I have, right? And then you sort of start to transcend that, and then I think what you look at now, and this isn't like a we're doing it so excellent thing, it's just sort of like we're not mimicking anyone anymore. Like, it's become a thing that's it's too complex now. There is not a thing to mimic for us to be. We're just trying to be ourselves. And there's an interesting place there. And I think that's like the human development thing as well. Like, us coming up as ball players, you had models to aspire to be like them. And then ultimately, if you're lucky enough, you just start pitching or hitting or being like yourself, whatever that is, you know, from a, you probably hate this language, but like thought leader perspective or whatever. It's like you had to learn breath and physiology from somebody, you know, and then, but now in this seat that you sit in, it's like your views and opinions and the things that you would say on the topic include elements of that, but it's its own thing, you know, it's its own thing. And so I think we're constantly marching through progression, you know, to get to this thing that hopefully is ultimately us, whatever that is.
That's where I think that's what I think it is. I can't know that it's that, but I have faith that that's what we're going after. Because it's an intimidating thing to be authentic. Like it's tossed around. I mean, there's no incentive, at least from what I can perceive. What's the incentive of really telling the truth in the information era? What's the incentive?
Yeah, we've had an incredible conversation. You probably can't mention that or whatever, but being in an organization where you're like, you know, someone comes to you and they're like, Harv, what do you think? You know, like, why isn't this going well? And you're like, well, we don't want to tell the truth around here, you know? And it's like, well, I think I do, you know? And I don't know. I think the authenticity thing gets thrown around too much because I think it's almost, it's a synonym for just being contrarian or saying something that's mean. Or, you know, it's like, that's not really what it is. Like truth is something else. And so, I don't know. It's going to be hard for me to not go into my very specific dogma about that, which is, the containers for truth need to be built, you know. Maybe this is where we take the conversation, which is, I think that life is a full-time job as a individual sport. You know, it's like this internal thing. And just to throw the wrench into things, it's like, we don't do life by ourselves. No. It's in this complex web of relationships in organizations, etc. And I think one of my biggest fascinations from a cultural perspective is the highest priority is to create a container, to build and defend a container that could share the truth. And most organizations are suffering from a reality that isn't that, you know. And I don't know, what are your thoughts on all of this individual chatter that we've had as it relates to groups? Because then it just gets so messy and complex, you know.
Well, I think back to a faith of mine and what I think this is, what I'm learning or understanding of humanity. I think that it's weird, right? I've worked with thousands of people in a not a therapist way, but in a psychological way, right? Where it's just conversation based talking, and that's what my job is just sort of having discussions with people. And the more that I've listened to people over the last 10 years in a working professional side, is I've realized it's just, I'm just listening to me back. It's just running it back. And so I've a lot of times I've sort of, whether I change in the future or not, I'm not sure. Right now, my understanding is that the interconnectedness of all of us is we're all the same. And we can see errors in people because we know that in ourselves, right? So we're kind of these mirrors walking with each other. Where I think it gets really fascinating, and as I've worked in groups, is that when you talk to people individually, that's not like a non-agreeable topic. Like if you get someone one-on-one, it's like, yeah, for sure. Oh, yeah. I get it. But then you get into a group of 10 and it's not. I say this exact same thing 20 different ways all the time. Interviewing people individually in a group will give you one reality. Put the same people in a group and the group dynamic makes for a different reality. Yeah. Groups will choose outcomes and realities that no one wants simply because they're in a group. Well, so the book that I have coming out in a couple months, the second chapter of the book is called Abstract God. And I talked the entire chapter about how likely is it that my God is the same God as your God, even if we're the same religious background. How likely of it is that we're talking about the same thing? And most of it is based off the fact that the interpretation is so drastically different. And so we just make sound and agree on the tone of the sound. Okay. And so if you get a group of people, it's like, well, if I have a group of people, here's what I think it really is. If we're in a group of 10, there's 10 people. The goal is the 10-person interpretation of, do we agree on the sound? So we never know, right? It's like, essentially, do we agree with our own lie? Right. And how well we conform to that is how much we essentially go, yeah, that's our God, right? But
that's heavy.
But knowing, and this is where I would love to throw it back at me, knowing that in the group that I cannot know as much as I know that you do not know. So even as I speak, I cannot know. And the whole point of my own process of getting closer to kind of knowing is to use the group and play this thing out to the highest degree of attachment that we can possibly get, knowing that the individual gift I'll get out of that is a transcending experience. But I got to know that this doesn't matter.
Yeah.
And does the group know that it doesn't matter? And I think if that were to take place on large scale, well, then we'd be able to hear each other in ideally a non-judgmental way. But in order for this thing to make sense, the paradox of the non-judgmental way is we have to judge each other. Because if we were so detached,
well, we are, no matter what, like judging each other. That's part of perception. Yeah.
You see what I'm saying though?
Yeah,
so then it has to fit. So it has to be complex. Yeah. We has to not work for us to keep trying to make it work. And if it worked, then there'd be no, like, I think about it like this, like, imagine if good and evil, we'll not use religious terms, let's just call it good and evil. Imagine if the whole world jumped on the bandwagon of good. By the time good got to the 1 yard line, it would realize that if we score, well, then what?
Yeah, that's right.
So, okay, well, let's push back a little bit. Let's get some bad.
Right.
And I think it just is that human experience. Like, we just run it back and forth so that we can replay the show.
Yeah, there's forever a dance. I don't think there's any end zones present. In a second, we gotta wrap, and we'll do a part 2, part 3. Because it's about to get lively in here. You talk about, maybe that's where we leave it as the cliffhanger, which is, we've talked a lot about the individual experience, and that's, we can and probably should spend our whole life marching towards knowing ourselves. And the paradox is, we're playing this collective version of life with other people. And you touched on something. There is a collective wisdom, because I think I know we've talked about this in the past, you can acknowledge that perception is limited, right? Your experience of this moment is a biased, distilled, untrue, filtered version of reality. And so is mine. So is Machete's. Exactly. However, if we could aggregate the truth from various perspectives, which there's a process that we use called the 5 perceptual positions, right? Moving through. They are 1, self; 2, other; 3, observer; 4, group; 5, source. If you can start to use the collective experience to get closer to the truth, like a truer version of the truth, there's something interesting there that I think justifies us working in groups to achieve both individual and collective goals. And I think that we should dive into that.
We should dive into that. And let me have this final thought, because I can feel the energy behind us too, building up. That's right. In my hypothetical, theoretical opinion of what's happened in the 21st century, is this not the first time in human history in the 21st century that the 8 billion person tribe is truly interconnected?
That's right.
And that is fascinating to me.
As far as we know.
Yeah, as far as we know, we started 500 years ago to globalize a little bit. And now we can communicate as a tribe on a globe. So I don't know what that means, but if you think of an energetic pulse of a collective consciousness of a globe of 8 billion organisms, that's a hell of an energy. It's an adaptable energy. And if we think of the adaptability of that type of energy, to me, here's the hypothesis. How is that not evolving the human organism? If we came from the sapien, how is that not evolving the thing? I don't think that happens in our lifetime, but I'm just saying, are we not a part of the massive friction right now of the interconnectedness that blows up into the evolution of the species?
I think so. I think it's going to get interesting really quick, and I think that the development is increasing at an increasing rate.
Yeah.
And who knows?
Which is adaptation.
Yeah. Who knows what will happen? Harv, this has been awesome. This is explicitly a recruiting trip, so I'm trying to do more of this with you.
I got in the car, I kissed the wife, I said, I'm heading out.
I'll talk to your agent or however that works, but we're gonna get you involved over here.
I love it. This was fun.
Thanks, brother. Appreciate it. All right, guys, that's the episode with Harvey Martin. Hopefully a lot of that resonated. A lot of what I want to close with Harvey is this idea of characters and the characters we play. Harvey, for example, has the title under his name, director of performance, or these connections to major league teams. But he is much bigger than that. You two are bigger than the characters you play and the titles that you hold. And spend some time, like Harvey asked us to do, to get outside of that sort of closed box thinking. We are more than the characters we play. We are going to take a bit of a spring break, so thank you for listening to that. We're going to come back in a couple weeks, and I'm excited to share with you the coming episodes with the great guests that we have coming. And don't forget, the Leadership Laboratory applications are open at holdthestandard.com. The Leadership Laboratory is where people go to develop their leadership capacity. So if that's you, if you're curious about growing those capacities with other motivated people, jump in, and we're having a great conversation on a weekly basis at holdthestandard.com.